Hi, everyone. I'm here with Signe Myers Hovem. She is the author of The Space in Between, an Empath's Field Guide. She has created homes on 5 continents over 20 years, raised 4 uniquely sensitive children, and worked as a spiritual counselor in Houston, Texas, and taught workshops and trainings in the art of being an empath and the power of language in many countries around the world. She splits her time between Boulder, Colorado and Oslo, Norway. Thank you, Signe, for joining me today to talk about your book, The Space in Between. I am
Thank you
so
for having me.
excited. Look at this.
You have a lot of notes.
I do. I just thought it was fascinating and incredible. And actually, I went back a few times to read through it. And I think whenever I have questions about empathy, I'm going to come back and use your field guide. Um, so thank you for joining me. And let's just jump right in and tell me what inspired your book.
I have to say, it's actually coming to terms with my own sensitivities and realizing, because I have a very practical kind of foundation to myself, and everything I was encountering seemed to really be either fear-based or counterintuitive advice being given to people, like such as protect yourself, armor up. And so that made me realize that this is a subject that could really benefit from being demystified and brought down and defined, because I think that's what I was encountering was confusing messages either in mass media or the way that people would present themselves. And so I just really felt that it was time to have a larger conversation with a lot more definitions kind of laid out, like taking apart an engine and going, okay, let's identify all the parts that make this engine run.
Yes, yes. I got that from your book, and it's just incredible. And so talk about the space in between the title. What does that mean?
It has, you know, you could look at it very different ways depending on how you're experiencing it. But as an empathic person, meaning that you have a sensitivity to feeling energy within a space or from a person or from the land, and there may not, and it's not originating from you, and there may not necessarily be a person in the room for you to say, oh, it's from that person. So it has kind of this unknown origin. And it really highlights that a sensitive empathic person is kind of in between spaces. They're kind of hovering there in the physical realm as well as the energetic realm. And when I say energetic, we have emotions, we have thoughts, and yet we don't really see them, right? They're non-physical and they're energy. And so I just wanted to say, when I discuss energy fields, it's as simple as, what is experienced but yet not seen.
Mhm. Yeah, so talk a little bit about what the difference is between empathic and empathy.
Right. That's a great thing to, this is one of those engine blocks I tried to take apart. So empathy is accessible on the physical and the energetic realm. So empathy is like this experience that you can host yourself based on your own emotional awareness.
Okay.
But what is different is when you are empathic and you're picking up something energetically, not on the physical realm. And an example of that is if I were to see something, say an accident, I could have, and I've been in an accident, I could instantly have some empathy for what this person is going to have to go through to either recover or just, even if it was a minor accident, the insurance issues and whatnot, I could have a lot of empathy. But that was based on me seeing something and bringing it back to my own life experiences. But when you can feel something that doesn't originate from you and you pick it up, meaning you suddenly feel a shift in your mood, or you suddenly have invasive thoughts that really weren't reasonable for you to be having, or you have a physical pain. I'm a physical empath, so I get body aches. That then isn't relying on you having seen something. And it's more about your ability to recognize you've received some information, and that is empathic. So I like to really help people understand that if you're hosting empathy, it's an emotional awareness and a personal development skill that you have, because not everybody can host empathy. You know, there are people who it just does not come natural, and then there's others that they can almost have too much empathy. But so that's something you are developing within yourself. But when you are empathic, you are receiving intuitively sensory information. And so that's more of a nervous system. That's more of a sensory perception. So you can see they're really completely different things. And so that's why when I do read, and people do use the word empathic a lot to mean empathy. And what I'd like to say is you want the word empathetic to say, you know, somebody has a lot of empathy or empathetic. When you use the word empathic, I tend to think, okay, you're talking about the energetic realm, intuitive sensory perception.
Well, yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Now, if someone has come to the conclusion that they're an empath, they're empathic, how do you think they arrived at that label for themselves? How do you recognize that?
That's that's the interesting question of the day, because, when I was younger, and, this was not a really common word that was floated around. And I honestly didn't really hear the word until I was in my late 20s, early 30s, and, started to understand that this was more about intuition and sensory perception. But nowadays, it seems to be just a very almost buzzword. The amount of people, and it's awesome if, there is such an awakening that people are having, that they are sensitive, they are honoring their intuition. I just, for myself and in the book, I just want to caution people, though, of going straight for the noun as an empath, because it is a journey, and there is an arc of awareness that you gain. And, so for myself, I was initially overwhelmed, and I didn't know what to do with all my sensitivities. So I would say that, for many years, I was not an empath. I was simply empathic, needing to learn the skills and, turn inward and gain an awareness of what was happening, and kind of bring that more on board. And when I got more and more comfortable with this, and also I recognized, that the idea that you needed to protect yourself was kind of redundant, because your empathic nature is a form of protection and gives you information from the environment. And so, I had to really reframe and have a personal relationship and independent study, to really say, confidently, yes, I am an empath. And, so the people of today, I share this sometimes that, I have a friend who had gone to a therapist recently, and the therapist told them that they were an empath and suggested they get some books. And so, she immediately went to that declaration, I'm an empath, whereas I would have, I'm sorry, my phone just started to make noise on me.
That's okay.
So, so I just feel that, going straight to the label without taking time to really understand what you're identifying, what you're aligning to, it can complicate it a bit.
Yeah, I can see that. It's figuring out, are you, just displaying empathy, or are you an empath and what that entails? And I think that your book goes through that and will help somebody trying to figure out if they are an empath. Now, with your own experience, what it tell us how you came to know that you were an empath. Like, what was different and unique about how your experiences for an empath?
Right. Well, I'm a spiritual counselor, and I had been working doing energy work. I didn't use the title healer because I feel that saying healer kind of implied that I needed people to heal. And I think that everyone is whole and they're here in life and they're experiencing growth in their own particular unique way. And I just would like to support them on that journey. So for myself, part of the tools that I used in doing energy work is that because I'm a physical empath, I can feel what's going on in the person's body, or I might be able to pick up emotions. And it just helps me. It's like a guidance for me in what I am assisting this person in.
Sure.
So I was already using an empath skill in my work as a spiritual counselor. So when I would give my business card out, it says spiritual counselor. It doesn't say empath. But what I've discovered on my, trying to go through my childhood, kind of understand what is mine, which is a very important thing. And this is why I think people who are empathic, you're partly empathic because it's helping you turn within, understand your life experiences and your stories, and where do you have empathy. And, because you really need to know yourself and your stories, your triggers, before you're ever available really to help other people or have the capacity to help other people. And so, when I started to do more of my own listening to my story, things settled down actually, rather than being overwhelmed. I gained clarity. I gained boundaries. I gained a ton of compassion for myself and for others, because really when you're picking up something from someone else, it's what they haven't processed, right? So that's why it's out there. If you were a factory and you're processing, it's inside, you're working on it, you're owning it, you're looking over it. But when you haven't processed something and it's kind of flushed out, and you pick this up, it really, if you can get to a place of having compassion for what you're feeling, because you recognize this person isn't aware, or they haven't named what they're feeling, or what's too difficult for them to feel, it makes it so less combative for your environment and your perception of the environment, because the environment is not out to get you.
Yeah.
You just happen to have a larger receptivity for the conversations that are going on. And that's part of the demystification I'm hoping people will come away with reading the book, because really, if you look at life, there's three aspects to life. Everything around you is doing three things. It's either communicating something, it's a message being received. And so to communicate, you need a receiver, a transmitter, and the message. And we are fluctuating. Our biology is constantly fluctuating with this too. All your synapses, all your biochemical, there's just this constant oscillation between these three states. And so an empathic person or an intuitive person, they just are open to a larger conversation that's going on that maybe other people aren't picking up.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I actually do Reiki, and I can I don't see myself picking up the sensories in the environment if I'm just at a restaurant or if just talking with a friend. But if I am giving Reiki to someone, they are in the presence with me. I'm not giving distance Reiki, I'm giving it, in person. I can pick up messages, and I consider it intuitive. But in your book, you mentioned how it's been related to the paranormal. And I've struggled with that. And I don't tell many people that I do Reiki because number one, I don't feel like it's paranormal. And number two, I don't feel psychic. So I thought it was very interesting that you were demystifying this the word empath, because I think more people will come forward if they're not labeled as a witch, a psychic. And so can you speak more to this whole demystification?
Yeah, one of the things that was big for me was, and it took me a long time to write this book, was to find the language in which it would be accessible to people who are mildly curious or maybe wondering if they are or if they know someone. I wanted to make it an easy entry into at least contemplating these ideas. And one of the things, I have a chapter called Breaking Down a Bias. And part of this is looking at the dictionary and its role in keeping it paranormal and making it more difficult for people to language themselves to themselves and to others. Because, if you go to the dictionary, and empath has the origin of science fiction or fantasy and paranormal. And so all of this in a resource that's considered an authority doesn't help us. And so this is why part of my book is, how let's look at forming a campaign and maybe getting them to update that definition there and normalize it a little bit more. But it's also about separation consciousness, which is where, you have this kind of a programming that we're born into, unintentionally, but the generations that have been in the past seem to really have a right, wrong, black, white. Yes, the gray is coming out and people are able to be a little bit more neutral and not be jumping to judgment and projections immediately. Because when you have empathy, which is a beautiful gift, empathy allows you to kind of hold somebody and still value them as a person, but maybe their behavior wasn't brilliant, but you're not condemning them. And but also part of separation is thinking that we're a body and we're in the physical realm, and then there's this energetic, very mystical, spiritual, unknown veil. There's this stuff you just can't figure out, and so we're going to leave it over there. And my hope is that people understand that we're both physical and energy.
Yeah.
And the more we can bring these two ideas or realities together integratively, we become more of a whole person. And we accept our emotions, and we can look at our thoughts and particularly belief systems that are limiting us. And for myself, the more we honor this kind of bioenergetic reality, the more people are going to say, oh, you do Reiki. That's really interesting. I would like to know more about it. As opposed to, secretly kind of going, oh my gosh, what is she up to? And what hasn't she been telling us? Or, oh my goodness, she can read my thoughts. There's a lot of that. And so I think on one hand, I was just saying, minutes ago about how I'm like, please don't go directly to empath. But I also want people to get to the point that they can like say, oh, I am an empath, but they can say it with the integrity and the authenticity that they understand what they are. And, you know, I started the book with the quote by Pindar, know who you are and be such. And I think this is the call that I would like everyone, sensitive or not, to really be interested in who are they as a human being. And with all the bells and whistles that we have that we maybe haven't allowed ourselves to investigate because it's just too easy externally to use technology or to just buy into a mass media platform and just be spoon-fed.
Exactly. And that leads to my next question about, can anyone be an empath? And if so, what would that entail in becoming one? Because, for example, I don't consider myself an empath because of, I don't walk into a room and feel energy, but maybe I'm not recognizing it. Maybe, so can anybody be one, and how would they do that?
Right. You know, it's interesting because the highly sensitive person label, you know, they have done genetic research with it and they've identified that there is a genetic marker, and it's, I think, between 15 and 20% of the population have that marker. And so and not everyone is obviously a highly sensitive person, right? So I'm not comfortable then just kind of extrapolating and saying, well, highly sensitive person is just another word for empath, because that's not necessarily true. And I really tried to discuss that in the book as well. But you can be both highly sensitive and empathic. So there's a spectrum here. I want to say that anyone who has a willingness and a willingness to explore their intuitive side. And I say intuition is just your ability to read energy, and that we do it without even realizing we're employing intuition. Like, you know, you're driving and you have a sense that this one lane is going to go faster. And how did you have that sense? Well, without maybe you understanding it, your intuitive side read the energy and gave you that kind of nudge, you know. So these are things that are happening in our daily life, but we just don't we don't honor it quite as much as being always present. It's more like this mystical thing that comes over, and it makes great stories around a dinner table about, oh, my intuition told me to do this, as if it was some off-board thing, when it was actually a part of you that you've just not maybe integrated enough or honored enough. So the answer about being an empath is somebody, if you went from the spectrum of an empathic person, which is very passive, it means our sensories, again, it's a sensory thing. So if we look at our 5 senses that we have, that we use primarily to create perception of our environment, there are our sight, our smell, our hearing, our touch, our taste. This all helps us build relationship and experiences and a knowingness of what our world is. But empathic sensitivity, such as feeling something, hearing something, smelling some, you know, odor that's, you can't understand why you smell that. These are too passive. They come to the person. It's not like an empath is searching around for things. It comes to them and they either tune into it or they don't, or they, you know, say, oh, that's an interesting smell. But if you were to go from, oh, that's an interesting smell, to what is that smell? Let me go try and find that smell, or what's that smell about? You've entered a more active phase. And when you go from passive to active, that is the threshold for me of when you're going into being an empath. And so, you know, and people can be doing this quite naturally, you know, maybe they've never gone to a course, or they've never, you know, done a developmental thing or have a mentor, but they've just are a curious person by nature, maybe in meditation, they have things come to them, and it just develops quite organically. So for me, an empath is knowing that you're going to engage something, and engage it. I mean, you're not healing a person. You're just acknowledging, oh, I'm going to name this. Okay, I feel sorrow, and you name it. And so in naming it, you have given it a form that can be addressed either by I didn't create the sorrow, but somewhere it was originated as an origin. So this person is feeling sorrow. And in that moment, I could say a prayer for the unknown person who created the sorrow, or I could counter it by what would help sorrow, what resolution, so in my own way, I'm just kind of approaching it without trying to investigate too much, because that's stepping over boundaries.
Yes.
And I think that's another thing that needs to be highlighted, is there's a lot of talk about boundaries and about how you need to create boundaries, you need to protect yourself. But a lot of times empathic people cross over boundaries. It's like easy to point the finger at other people, this narcissistic person, this and this and that. But, really, if you come back to yourself and ask for your own intentions and motivations for doing or engaging energy, you have to be honest to yourself about your own boundaries and what you may be stepping over.
Yeah. I like that advice. When I was reading your book, what struck me was when you said an empath can observe and recognize, but it's not their job to fix anyone or to heal anyone. And I think that is a very powerful message to people who feel like this is coming to me. There's a reason this is coming to me. I have to find a way to heal this person. So what are your thoughts on someone who may feel overwhelmed by all of these, I'm going to say triggers that come to them, these sensations, and they don't know what to do with it, and they feel like it's on them to help somebody?
Right. And that's a great question, because, and you used the word trigger. So, you already were intuiting the relationship there, is that, when we feel something, we have to be honest with ourselves. Is this a mirror? Is this a reflection that we need to look at because it's relevant to our own life? Because I always find it interesting, if you start getting a theme of what you're picking up, and it's also something that's going on in your own life. So that's really an invitation to say, okay, I need to deal with this for myself. This has been kind of the environment reflecting back to me. And the other thing too is that, the best way I can describe this is, if somebody can understand something for themselves, like they process it, it is fuel that they can use for their own growth, versus you have a therapist or you have somebody with all good intentions, but just, it's like, oh, have you ever noticed this pattern that you've got? And they're just kind of, giving this information to the person, even though they might not have asked for it.
Yeah.
And it'd be very hard for that person to take it in, because one, if they're not aware of that pattern, but you are, because you're picking it up, it doesn't derail them, but it takes away their own journey, or it delays it. And, so this is kind of the spiritual maturity that I talk about in the book, at, your ability to witness somebody. Yes, you can name what you feel because you're helping clear the environment, and naming will help do that. It will help diminish it. But you're not taking away another person's spiritual growth. And I don't know if you can think for yourself, Annie, about anything that you had an aha moment about, that like the light bulb came on and you're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe, and that's powerful to you. I'm sure it was powerful, like, but versus if somebody said, oh, hey, did you notice that?
Yes.
So, yeah. So, this is where the respect, to have respect for each person's journey.
Yeah.
And at the same time, understand if you're feeling something because you're empathic, yes, you're there to help the environment and to possibly support someone, but it's also about yourself. Why would you be picking that up? Like you and I could be two empaths in a room and we could pick up different things. I can be, maybe my emotional body is more sensitive to emotions than, maybe your mental body is more of your kind of receptor and you pick up more thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
But so it's very customized to your own sensitivity, your own life story. I might be more sensitive to certain things because of things in my life. So this is also why I try not to like say one label fits all.
Mm-hmm.
This is really a guide into yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's interesting that you talk about the mirror reflected back. I hadn't thought about it that way, and that is so eye-opening because, like you said, you might be picking up something in the environment, and the reason you're picking it up is because it's something you yourself have to work on. So either then start working it on yourself and don't feel like you have to fix the other person. But if it's not something you resonate with, then observe it, clear the space, and move on. But I just love this whole mirror reflecting because I'm on a spiritual journey. I know that. And I want to overcome some things. So I'm going to have to pay more attention to that now.
Right, because it is, I say there's like, boundaries are great. And
Yeah.
boundary for an empath or an empathic person is to ask, is this mine? But
Okay.
in asking, is it mine? It's just not like, did it originate for me and I'm only now becoming aware?
Yeah.
But is it mine because it's reflecting something for me to see?
Mhm.
Is it mine because, yes, it's reflecting something for me to see and I could possibly help with the awareness that I now have. I could also help clear this room a little bit better because I personally can understand what this is about.
Mhm.
There's sometimes, as an empath, you can experience things that are just totally left field and you have no awareness from your own life. And that can be a little bit disorienting because you're like, okay, well, what's this about?
Yeah.
And, and my message to people would be, don't jump to trying to label something too quickly.
Mhm.
Let it reveal itself. And, and it could reveal itself, over the next hour, the next few days. Maybe it'll never reveal itself. And it just isn't one of those, okay, well, I don't know what to call that. But it's about being curious, but not being fearful.
Mhm.
I think too, that's the other thing is, to help dismantle the fear element. And that one of the reasons I dismantled the fear element was when I recognized energetically, we all have energy fields that an empath, when you're empathic and you pick up something in the environment, your energy fields expand like a luggage suitcase with a zipper expander.
Yeah.
And this is why we're called a sponge. We actually absorb, but it doesn't mean we absorb it into our energy fields. It just means that it's out there waiting for us to discern what is it, right?
Mhm.
And it's naturally doing what all the other senses do, which is if you saw fire, you would know, okay, my environment's, possibly harmful, dangerous, I need to prepare. Or you smell smoke, or you see hear an explosion. All of these senses are telling you information about your environment and whether you're going to need action to protect yourself. Your empathic sensitivity is also holding that information, but because it may feel like it's in your body, or it might really seriously change your mood or overwhelm you with emotion, we feel like it has somehow come into us and it has occupied us, when that's really not initially what's happening. So this is the other thing, by by just demystifying it, it hopefully it gives people a little bit more room to say, okay, let me see what this is about.
Yes, yes. And I love your thought about, letting it come to you. And I feel like we're not supposed to be, oh my gosh, I got to deal with this. I have to do this now. It's there, just kind of let it be, sit with it rather than being anxious and nervous that something came into your life.
Right.
Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah. Because, initially when I was a bit overwhelmed, it was like I could barely walk into a store, particularly an antique store. It's just overwhelming to me initially, but, and there are environments I know that will tax me. And so I don't, that's not where I go hang out because I know that about myself.
Yeah.
So this is the other thing is, you shouldn't, need to cloister yourself away from your life.
Yeah.
You learn resilience by putting yourself into situations that might have been challenging. But the more you give yourself a chance to figure yourself out and what is your triggers and what is your life and what, oh, when I feel that, that usually means this, kind of creating a glossary, your own personal glossary. That gives you the tools that, okay, you can more immediately go out and say, oh, that I just picked that up. That kind of means this. And, but I have found that when you are honest and you declare, I need time to figure this out, or I don't have the capacity to understand this right now because I've got something else going on in my life. But I will get to it. And it kind of calms down because you've addressed it, you've acknowledged it. Yes. You maybe haven't processed it, but you at least acknowledged it. And, going to go work on it could mean like journaling about it and having an automatic kind of response come through your journaling that gives you insight that you hadn't considered. Or it could be going on a walk where, you pose the contemplation about it and just see what circulates in through inspiration. These are all ways of going within.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like that advice. Now I'm going to have to journal right after this to to get to the heart of some things. But okay, so I really appreciate you spending time with us this morning. And where can people find your book?
Right. Well, my book is available in all major book outlets. I will say that I'm redoing my website and I'm going to have an interactive empath quiz by the end of the month up there. So you could go www.empathfieldguide.com and it will take you to my website, or you could use smhovem.com, either one, and the links to where you can buy my book are there as well. But I would ask, if anyone reads it, I would love to have reviews. This helps an author very much. And I'm also really curious if people would want to use the book as a spiritual book club. And so if people listening to this have a community or a group that does kind of more spiritual based book clubs, I reach out to me because, I would love to kind of sit in or zoom in from Oslo to have, field questions. That would be really super fun for me.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah, I think you would be great to sit into those and provide guidance. And yeah, I want everybody to read your book. So, but thank you so much for joining me